The morning light crept softly through the wide windows of their New York apartment. The silence felt deliberate, as though the room itself was unwilling to intrude on something private. Kelly Ripa sat at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly around a mug she had long forgotten to drink from. Across from her, Consuelos stood quietly, watching the steam rise, curl, and disappear, much like the certainty they had relied on for so long. To the world, they had always been the jokers, the lovers, the effortlessly relaxed couple. For decades, people admired their partnership, the passion, the humor, the teamwork, the friendship. But on that gray morning, behind closed doors, a heavy silence settled between them, one neither knew how to break. Laughter felt distant, almost unreachable. It had begun subtly, an overworked explanation for lingering exhaustion, a missed workout here and there. Mark, once endlessly energetic and in motion, had started to slow down in ways that were easy to overlook until they weren't. Kelly noticed first. Months earlier, she had casually asked, "Are you okay?" after watching him sink into the couch instead of lacing up his running shoes. He smiled, offering the familiar reassurance that had won her heart countless times before. But this time, the smile didn't reach his eyes. The diagnosis, if it could even be called that, didn't arrive with sirens or dramatic hospital scenes. It crept in quietly, wrapped in probabilities, medical language, and cautious pauses. Nothing was definitive. The doctor spoke softly, choosing each word carefully, as though gentleness might soften the fear hanging in the room. It wasn't life-threatening, he explained, but Mark would need to slow down, be mindful, reassess his pace, his work, his constant need to push forward. For someone like Mark, the idea was terrifying. Kelly squeezed his hand throughout the appointment, grounding both of them. In that moment, there was only his breathing and the silent promise she made to herself, "We'll get through this together." When the news finally became public, carefully vetted and cautiously shared, it caused a frenzy. Headlines shouted, social media erupted. Everyone wanted answers, details, reassurance. But the headlines didn't understand what Kelly already knew. Real fear is quiet. It lingers in the dark. It wakes you at 3 in the morning for no clear reason. When Kelly eventually spoke about it, she didn't share medical specifics. She spoke about vulnerability. On television, in a rare and tender moment, she admitted that despite a lifetime of talking, she had learned what it meant to be afraid of asking questions you weren't sure you wanted answered. Her voice trembled, not theatrically, but with the rawness of everyday life. When she spoke of strength, she didn't mean heroics. She meant the kind that comes from loving someone so deeply that their pain outweighs your own. The helplessness of watching the person who has stood beside you through everything suddenly need you more than ever. For Mark, the hardest part wasn't anger or denial. It was the loss of control. "I've always believed in pushing through," he whispered to Kelly one evening. "What if slowing down means I don't recognize myself anymore?" She cupped his face gently, steadying him the way she always had. "Maybe it means you finally get to meet the part of yourself you've been too busy to know." Healing didn't come easily. Some days were filled with hope, energy, and laughter that felt almost nostalgic. Others were heavy, weighed down by exhaustion and frustration. Slowly, they found new rhythms, walking instead of running in the mornings, quiet dinners instead of elaborate ones, stillness where urgency
Something
once
unexpected happened. They began listening more carefully, to their calendars, to doctors, to each other. Mark learned that rest wasn't surrender. Kelly learned she didn't always have to be perfect. Love, they realized, didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it showed up in silence, in joined hands, in navigating uncertainty together. When Kelly addressed the situation publicly again, she chose her words with care. This wasn't a health story. It was about mindfulness, about paying attention, about choosing love over fear. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people who saw themselves reflected in her words, spouses, partners, families facing their own quiet battles. The story stopped being about a famous couple. It became universal. Mark wasn't defined by that moment, and neither was Kelly. What mattered was what followed, the courage to pause, to adapt, to move forward without guarantees. Sometimes even frightening news can be a wake-up call. As dawn filled their apartment once more, Kelly finally lifted her mug and took a sip. The coffee was cold, but it didn't matter. She smiled. They weren't going anywhere. One steady, intentional day at a time, they chose hope. As weeks turned into months, something subtle yet profound settled into their lives. The fear never fully disappeared, but it no longer ruled them. Instead, it became a quiet reminder to slow down and savor the ordinary moments they once rushed through. Mark began writing, notes of gratitude, unfinished thoughts, reflections on vulnerability and aging. Kelly would sometimes find the notebook open on the counter, reading his uneven but honest handwriting, as though she could hear his heart speaking. They laughed more now, not the polished laughter for cameras, but the kind that came from shared glances and private jokes. They danced in the kitchen again. Arguments felt less necessary. Time felt more precious. Kelly realized that opening up hadn't weakened them in the public eye, it had humanized them. Mark, once afraid of slowing down, discovered peace in stillness. The future remained uncertain, as all futures do, but uncertainty no longer felt like a threat. It became a reminder to listen closely, love deeply, and never assume tomorrow is promised. This chapter, painful as it began, gave them clarity. Success was no longer measured by schedules or milestones, but by slow mornings and grateful evenings. Mark stopped chasing every horizon. The ones he chose now mattered. Kelly learned that not every story needs an audience to be meaningful. The days that followed were shaped by small choices rather than dramatic change. Mark began his mornings with books and the soft click of a teapot instead of the relentless drive to perform. At first, the quiet unsettled him, but over time it became sanctuary. The world felt clearer when he stopped running. Kelly faced her own exhaustion, the fatigue of always being strong. She realized that carrying everything alone created distance. On a rainy Tuesday, that truth surfaced in a simple moment in the kitchen over a stubborn jar of olives. When Mark struggled to open it, frustration flashed across his face. Kelly moved to help too quickly. "I can do it," he snapped. She paused, then sat across from him instead. "I don't want to be the one who's too afraid to admit I'm scared too," she said quietly. "I've been trying so hard to be your anchor that I forgot I need one as well." The tension broke. For the first time, they stopped trying to fix the diagnosis and began accepting it as part of their lives. Together, honest, imperfect, and deeply grateful, they moved forward, holding tightly to the fragile, beautiful gift they shared.